Merry Christmas. Okay, guess it's not. But we are talking, we're in the last section of 7.2, part 4, and let's start it off with a little bit of phenotypic polymorphisms. Woo, they're also known as discrete characters. I'm telling you, you throw that word, those two words out at a party, and you are going to look cool. Whoa. Phenotypic polymorphisms. People will be like, what? In your case, you can say something very simple as the widow's peak. Well, in this case, they call it the witch's peak. That's a little creepy. But all right, so what these phenotypic polymorphisms, what we're talking about is they're single gene traits for this discrete phenotypic outcome. Remember, phenotype, face, phenotype is what you see. So there's something that's very discrete, very specific, okay? They're also called either or traits. You either have the gene or you don't. So it in turn means you either produce the trait or you don't. Phenotypic, of course, is the physical outcome of that gene. It's physically what you see. Polymorphism, poly, many, morph means shape or version or type. So basically, it means that there may exist multiple versions of the same basic gene trait simply because of different sequence of nucleotides that make up that trait. So here we have one trait. Do you have a witch's peak here or do you not? Now, another example of that, of phenotypic polymorphisms, is blood type. So AB, and O blood types are examples. So they're all blood, but they're different versions or types of the same main gene that's being expressed. All right. Then if we look at the genotypic polymorphisms, remember genotypic, we're talking about little b, big B, little b things, the gene that codes for the actual trait. These are known as quantitative characters. And remember when we talked about quantitative, there's that N in there, quant, that N. And so we're looking at numbers. So there are traits that there could exist several phenotypic outcomes based on the fact that the traits are the cumulative interaction of several genes interacting with one another. So we're talking about multiple genes that will code for one, where remember with phenotypic polymorphisms, we had the gene coding for you either or, you either had it or you didn't. But here we have multiple that are interacting with one another. So the fact that there's several genes involved is basically based upon how many dominant alleles you inherit from your parents. And so, for example, the dominant allele makes the protein pigment that's found in skin that's called melanin. All right, so every human has this protein pigment unless you're an albino, unless you have albinism. And remember when we looked at the genetic disorders, we looked at albinism, this is where a genetic condition where the person does not inherit any, they have zero dominant alleles, and therefore they don't have a single DNA blueprint for making the protein pigment. So they have none. So they appear white because they don't have any pigment in their cells. So in those individuals who did inherit at least one dominant allele, they're going to have skin pigmentation. So basically, the more dominant alleles that are inherited, the darker the skin is going to be. So when we talk about race, that's really a man-made construct that tries to group individuals based on their geographic origin or their degree of skin pigmentation. But when it all comes down to it, really, truly, we're all human. It doesn't matter how much melanin we have in our skin. We're all human. The scientific name for every one of us, no matter how much melanin we have in our skin, is Homo sapiens. So we now recognize that the direct relationship, however, between the environment and the degree of pigmentation, we can see that. So populations that are around the equator are darker. And the point, I mean, we're talking about survival here, and that is to counteract the harmful effects of the sunlight, because the more melanin you have, the greater protection you have from the sun. And so then as we move away from the equator, that amount of pigmentation decreases typically, because you're not needing that same amount of pigmentation or that amount of protection because you don't have the direct sunlight. I mean, you could look at it kind of like if we had a recipe card and a blank index card. So if I had both of those, the recipe card is going to represent the dominant gene. And so we can make that recipe, we can make that protein because we have the information on the recipe card. The blank card represents the recessive gene. And we can't make the protein or we can't make the recipe because there's no information on it. Both of them are paper, and therefore both are DNA, but only the dominant gene is going to, oh, there's my doggy, there's my Maya came home. Yes, hi baby girl. Sorry, my dog came back. All right, so let's look at these evolutionary flow modes. We talked about, movement in population. So the evolutionary flow modes are ways of selection that affect the phenotypic, what we're actually seeing, that phenotypic outcome. So we can have, here's our original population, and there's three main ones that we look at. The directional flow. So if we have directional selection, here's our original population, and this, quote, this bell curve for a trait flows in one direction only. Thus the name directional, because it's going only in one direction. If we have the diversifying one, so here's our original, and then we have a diversifying or disruptive. I mean, when you look at it, it's been disrupted. So this bell curve separates in opposite directions at the same time. So it basically not really split in half, but you can see the effect. It goes in diversifies in both ways. Or we can have this stabilizing. So this original bell curve then moves to the stable center. So it becomes even more stable than where, and more individual. See here, you can see all these different phenotypes for fur color. And here, now we've narrowed it down to the one that works best. So these are all related to some trait that's going to be beneficial for survival. So if we're looking at all of these, all of them are not going to be beneficial for survival. But in the case of stabilizing selection, ding, 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 that's the winner. All right, so, or we could have something called neutral variation. This is there no survival benefit or harm. This is why we call it neutral, because there's no effect. There's no effect with it. For example, these fingerprints, everyone's different, but it doesn't help us survive. It doesn't help us or hurt us in regards to survival and reproduction. I mean, no one looks at it and goes, wow, those are some great fingerprints. I think I want to have children with you. I mean, it just doesn't happen. All right, so I guess maybe somewhere, who knows? All right, the sexual dimorphism. Of course, we know that di means two, and that morph means shape or structure or some sort of version, okay? So in sexual dimorphism, we have two different versions. We have the male and the female, and they are the direct result of secondary sexual characteristics that are associated with estrogen versus testosterone production. Obviously, estrogen with the females and testosterone. So they have certain traits based on those hormones that have been released. The difference leads to actually a sexual selection among the population organisms. So when we're talking about intrasexual, this is, intra means within one. So this is within one sex. So this is males mainly fighting, this is males and males. And typically you'll have this where they're mainly fighting for reproductive rights. And again, it becomes survival of the fittest. Basically, which one is going to be able to fight the best for the female is the one that's going to be able to reproduce, and their genetic information is going to get passed along. Then we can have intersexual competition, and this is male female. This is between, inter is between, so this is between the two sexes. This is where males will strut to attract the female's attention. Look at that pretty male here. Obviously we see the males do this mainly in birds that have this very bright coloration, and then the females choose based on the fittest looks. So because to a female, she's looking at this going, he's looking pretty healthy, so yep, he's the one. Now the competition between the individuals makes sure that the best or the most fit genes get passed to the next generation. That's what it means. So inter up here, the strongest or the whatever, the most creative fighter or whatever they're going to need is going to be able to reproduce and pass their genes along. Or in interspecific, this male, the male that looks the best, that is the most appealing to the female, is the one that is going to get their genes passed on along. That's all we have for today. Happy New Year.